Hello, my name is A. Joseph Dupre III. I'm a member of the Technical Product Management team within the IXIA Solutions Group at Keysight Technologies, and today I'm going to walk through the process of deploying the IXIA IxLoad product on Microsoft Azure. The first thing that you're going to do is you'll go in the 9.0 release, which at the time of this posting is not, the time of this video is not exactly posted yet, but you'll go to the traditional download site. There'll be a resource for IXVM, IxLoad, in particular 9.00, and you'll be able to select IxLoad as an application, and there'll be an option for Azure. So you can see that previously in other releases we have many different options for different hypervisors, and adding support for, in this case, Microsoft Azure Public Cloud. And what you'll do is you'll download from the IXIA support site a little tar.gz file. And what I'm going to do is it's this IXIA VE MS Azure deployment. I'm going to unpack that. And unpack the tar that's within it. And what that's going to do is going to give me a series of scripts. One of them is a bash script, and the other one is a series of ARM templates that are written in JSON for the actual deployment. So we need the bash script in order to be able to copy the master image for IxLoad and for the VM1 IXIA Virtual Test Appliance over to our local Azure account, and then we can use these JSON files, and there's different examples, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but the idea is that we'll be able to select one of these JSON files and then do a deployment of the IXIA product, and that will build all the pieces we need. So let's start first with the bash script. So what we need to do is we need to go over to our Azure accounts. This is the target where we want to do our work, and you can see I'm in the Azure console here, Azure portal. I'm going to open up a Cloud Shell, a bash shell there. And what I want to do is I want to upload. We're going to go to Downloads folder. We're going to go into our unpacked tar.gz here. And we're going to grab the bash file and open that up. And now if we do an ls in here, we can see that it's there. I'm going to do a chmod +x to make it writable, star.bash. Oops, gotta spell that correctly. Mod. Okay, so change the mode there. And then we also need to do a DOS to Unix to get rid of the control M's. That'll be in the file that'll prevent it from running. So we're going to do the same thing, star.bash, so DOS to Unix, the number 2, to convert it. So it's been converted. And then what we can do is we need to have, basically this is going to copy the master IXIA images, they're page blobs basically, and they need to be copied over to my account. And so what I need is if I run this just without arguments, it's going to basically tell me that I'm missing a couple of arguments. And so one thing I need to do is I need to have a resource group where I'm going to, send these images to, and I'm going to have a storage account within that. And it kind of gives an example here of what I can do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a resource group. Now what we'll do is we'll make one to just show you the example of running this script, but it does take quite a while to copy the images over. So I will start this up, but then we'll switch over to one that already exists, and we'll keep talking from that point on. But just to give you an idea of how this works, I'll create a resource group in Azure. So we'll call this demo images, and we'll put it in a region. and create that. So it's validated, create it. Okay, and if we refresh, we should see the demo images. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pass an argument. So the resource group is demo-images. And then we need to give a unique storage account name. So I'm going to call this demo IMGs 2019, and that's probably not being used. Let's hit enter. So it sees that the resource group is there. Okay, it did not find an existing storage account. I could have created that manually, but instead it's going to make that for me. And if we go in here now under demo images, let's see, if we do a refresh, we can see that there's a storage account created. And if you're following along here at the bottom corner of the video, it's starting to do work. And what that is it's starting to copy over the Ixia images. So if we kind of keep scrolling in here, go down a level, let's see, we'll go look at the blobs, so the page blobs, and you can see it's created a location, a folder in there, a container basically for the blobs, and it's starting to copy those. And if I were to refresh, we could see that it's basically writing those files. Okay. But what we're going to do is, that'll take a while. So what I'm going to do is show you what it looks like when it's done. So if I go back up to my resource groups, I have another one called Images 2019 where I already completed that process. And you can see that it has a storage account that I had created, right, that the script built for me. And under the blobs, there's similar folders that were created. In this case, it's the IxLoad VE900. And there are the two VHDs that were copied. And up at the top, back in the resource group, it's also smart enough to basically create an image link for me. Now, the one that we care about right now is the virtual test appliance image. The other ones we can ignore right now, and we'll use that. So it's basically, once this script is done, it will have copied over some VHD files, and it will have created one of the image files for us. And then what we can do is we can go to our templates. So that was the bash script. That's what gets the files over there for you. So now they're in my local resource group within a local storage account, and I have the files that I need to now do a deployment. So what I have to do is I have to choose an example deployment. So we have a set of, in this case, 6 JSON files that have different examples of things that you might want to do with IxLoad. We have so-called one-arm and two-arm tests. So a one-arm test would be a case where you have an IxLoad client, which is a Windows machine, and then you have an Ixia virtual test appliance, also called a VM1 appliance, and that's your virtual load module. So that's where you generate your traffic. So you'd have one client and one virtual load module or virtual test appliance. And in this case, you could also have 2 virtual test appliances. So a one-arm test would be as if you wanted to source your traffic from and out to an outside location. Sometimes you want to generate traffic between IxLoad setup. So if you want to do like a back-to-back scenario, or you want to send traffic through a device under test, there's different ways to do this. Now, the reason why we have 6 of them is there's 3 one-arm examples and there are 3 two-arm or 2 test appliance examples. One of them is a simple demo setup. So that's the most predefined environment where there's very few parameters that you pass in. It builds it all for you. It's kind of a standalone demo setup, and that's very common for people to get started with that. If you want a little bit more configuration on top of that, there's the new custom deployment version, and that gives you some more control over the IP addressing of the virtual network, the VNet, and some of the subnets. If you want to change the IP addressing from kind of the predefined values in the demo version. And then the third choice is a so-called add-on custom deployment, and that's where you might already have an existing topology, an existing VNet that's already been configured. You might have some devices out there, and you're trying to insert IxLoad into that environment. And so we have a couple of examples of that for each of these different templates. And again, they're reference templates. You can take them and modify them and customize them, to your needs, but they're kind of a getting started tool. So you use the bash script to copy your images over to your environment, and then you use one or more of these templates to deploy IxLoad, depending on what you needed, or you again could customize them and modify them, based on these examples. So what we'll do is we'll take the two virtual test appliance demo setup, and I'm going to borrow its name for a second. We're going to go over into the templates section here. We're going to add a new template. I'm going to use its name here in the description, but you have to put, it doesn't like certain characters, so I'm going to get rid of the dot here and put in an underscore to keep it happy for the name of the file. And then I'm going to go back to the file, which is this one, and I'm just going to do a select all, copy it, and I'm going to dump it into the editor here and hit OK. It's validated, so it's correctly formatted JSON, and I'm going to add it to the library. Okay, typically you have to do a force refresh here to see it. So there it is. It's the first one there. Move this over a little bit. Now what you can do is you can click on it, and you'll see that there's either an edit option if you want to make further changes yourself in the editor, or you can deploy. So what it does is it gives you, I'm going to go ahead and hide this shell. We don't need that anymore. We're going to use kind of the one that I created already. We'll just let that go ahead. So I'm going to create a new resource group. So resource groups are where you kind of group and organize things. So let's call this IxLoad deployment. Hopefully that's unique. Okay, so it's going to be a new resource group that's created. We're going to leave it in a local location here. Now I need to specify the image resource group name. So the resource group name where my images live is called images-2019. The page blobs, which are the VHD files, so the images are managed images. Those are basically managed by Microsoft. So the script created a managed image of the VM1, the virtual test appliance. But we're also going to need to deal with page blobs because the Windows client is actually not an image, it's a page blob. So what we have to do is we have to specify that location. And so I'm going to put that, the storage account that contains that is imgs images 2019. The location of so that's images 2019. You can see in the VHDs folder here, it's empty. So what I better do is I better take a copy here. I just want a unique copy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and copy this VHD over to the VHDs folder. So you do need to make a VHDs folder, refresh it, and it's there. So again, the tool will create this IxLoad VE900. I needed to create a VHD folder under at the same level basically, and then I made a copy of my VHD over there because that's what the template is going to look for. And so if I go back, that's that IMGS 2019 is that containing folder. And I also have created ahead of time a storage account for boot diagnostics. So I'm going to use that one. So let's change this to boot diagnostics 2019. You have to specify an inbound IP address. In this case, I'm going to use something here, but you would modify that represents your source IP address. If you're not sure what your actual source IP address is, the one that's visible to the world, just ask for your, what's my IP address in Google. I'm going to use the defaults here for the page blob names. That's the same as what the bash script created. I'm going to kind of leave the defaults here on all these. But when on the next four here, so these are just default VM sizes for the client and the test appliance, and the default name for the page blob, and the case of the virtual test appliance, the image name. Leave the sizes default there, but there are some drop downs if you want to choose other options there. I'm going to give it an optional prefix, so we're going to call this deploy, and going to give it an email tag. So if it does some tagging of your resources, if you want to kind of make your deployments unique, deploy at keysite.com, and I'm going to do give it a project name. So whatever project you happen to be working on, just a couple of user tags that you can add. You have to accept the agreement here and then go ahead and purchase because you want to run this stuff. I'm just going to take a quick look here. So you can see there are some options. Several of them are defaulted, and the others you can customize. So the purple ones kind of indicate things I've made some customizations to match my environment, and the other ones are kind of default. And then I created a new resource group, so we'll be able to use that a little bit later. Let's click purchase. And the heavy lifting is done by the JSON template, the ARM, the Azure Resource Management template, ARM template, you may hear it called, or JSON file is the format, the language. JavaScript object notation is the language that it's written in. And it's going to go ahead here. I'm going to clear some of the messages here that are completed. And you can see the deployment is going right now. So let's go take a look at that. So it's actually doing the work right now, and it's creating the objects. Here are the objects, and there's their current statuses. So there's different objects that are being created as we go along. This is basically building the network topology, the VNet, the topology that surrounds this, and we'll look at this inside the resource group. But basically, the objects for the networking are being created for this little demo setup. The IxLoad client is being created, and also 2 test appliances. And it's kind of going to keep going there, and you can kind of either let it refresh or manually refresh it once in a while to see that update. So what we'll do is we'll go back to our dashboard, let that kind of go. Let us pin a resource group. So we're going to, because our dashboard's pretty empty right now, we're going to go and find our resource group. Should be IxLoad deployment, and I'm going to pin that for later use. You can see all the objects. It's refreshing. Give it some time there. But on our dashboard now, you can customize this a little bit. You can put all kinds of helpful tools and stats and all kinds of widgets and things. And so those are some of the things that are being built. And we can also watch it here to see more. You can either click on it to go back to the resource group, or you can kind of refresh this and see what's going on. Now, what I like to do, I'll make this a little bit like that. Okay, is particularly if it's an environment I'm going to be using a lot, I like to go in and I like to pin placeholders here for the different objects that I care about the most. So this is the IxLoad Windows client. I'm going to pin him to the dashboard. I'm going to go back to the dashboard, grab virtual appliance 1, pin him, and I'm going to do the same thing with, make sure you're grabbing the right object. These are the virtual machines, so I want the actual running virtual machine. I'm just going to pin those. Most of the blades in Azure portal typically have some kind of pinning option, and you can see one's running, the other two are being created. So this is my Windows client. You can see that it is running, and it has a DNS name associated with it. And we'll come back to that in a second, but you can see that basically this is a VM that's running. We can even take a look at the boot diagnostics a little bit here, because we had specified a location. You can see it actually has a little screenshot capture here that you can kind of manually refresh, and it's showing us that it's sitting there at the lock screen. So that's a good sign. That means that there's we went from nothing, because our resource group didn't even exist, to a resource group filled with a bunch of things in it, and one of those things is our Windows machine. Now, if we take a look at the dashboard and we go to our resource group, which is pinned here, this is the whole resource group, we can kind of dive into the resource group, and we can see some of the cool things that have been created for us. I like to sort by type. So you can see that there are some disk images that are associated with the virtual test appliances. There are a number of network interfaces that are attached to our VMs. In the case of the client, it's for management. In the case of the test appliances, they have a management and one test interface. And again, all of the security groups for logging into the machine are set up. It's given public IP addresses with DNS so that you can reach them, and you have your network topology. And again, because this is the demo setup JSON file, the demo setup ARM template, these IP addresses are kind of predefined for you, right? If you wanted to modify them, you will get you'd have to go into the file and modify them. Some of the other templates, you can pass those as arguments and you can change the IP addressing. But you can see that there's a number of network interfaces. There is a 10.0.10 network. That's going to typically correspond to the E0s of the interfaces for the different machines. There is a 10.0.2 and a 10.0.3 corresponding to test networks. So we want to be able to transmit traffic from one virtual test appliance to the other virtual test appliance. And we can do that if we want to see the subnets. Another way to look at that is to look at what subnets were built and what ranges. So there's /24s here. And we saw that with all the interfaces that are attached. And you can see that there's some of the addresses are already taken because we've attached things to them. And so these are the two subnets where we want to generate some traffic. So this is a nice self-contained deployment. It's a very good getting started system. Now, some of you may have seen in the corner, if you saw it pop up here, I'm going to clear some of the background pinning here. It actually complained that the deployment failed. Let's take a look at that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move some of this over. So we got some kind of conflict. And it seems to be on a test appliance 1, test appliance 2. Let's go ahead and look at the operational details of one of those. And what you're going to see is you're going to get an error basically that's maybe a little hard to read, but the code is OS provisioning client error. And without getting into too much detail, this is actually an expected behavior for this. So these happen to be Linux machines that are customized by Ixia. They have not been fully integrated into the marketplace as of this time. They are basically unmanaged images. So when you try to use them as managed images, you will get a provisioning error. However, that does not really mean that the deployment was unsuccessful. It actually turns out that those things should be running. and we will actually see that in a moment. So let's go back to the dashboard, and you can actually see that. You can see running, and these guys are noted as VM running. So one Windows machine, two Linux machines, so it's actually going to be usable. So even though we got kind of a technical error out of the deployment script, it does not prevent us from being able to run. And we've seen this with other Azure images that are, kind of brought over into Azure from an external source, right? So these are unmanaged page blobs, and we're bringing them into Azure, so they will give you a little bit of a warning there. But if you see the OS provisioning error, you don't really have to worry. Let's go ahead and see if we can work with our Windows client, because that's where we do the bulk of our work. So we can click on our little pin here. Now, what you'll need to do is you will need to, in order to be able to get in with remote desktop, you'll have in the template you set your security group. So that IP address is your inbound source IP address that you're trying to use to connect to the client. So it has its own IP address, right? Here's the public IP address in the cloud, and here's the DNS right there. But the IP address that you pass through in the template is your IP address, your source IP address /32, for example. So what you want to do is, the security groups should allow that. And if you want to know what's allowed, what you can do is scroll around a little bit here as I can go to networking. This is on the VM, and you can actually see what the inbound port rules are. So it's allowing my IP address right now. So this is a corporate IP address. So you would replace that with your corporate IP address, and that would allow inbound on 443, 22, or 80. So what we care about, and 3389 in this case because of a Windows machine. So some of these obviously are for our Linux appliances, and some of them are for our this one obviously is for our Windows machine. So that's great. It's attached to the network. The E0 is attached to the network, and it has the inbound rules. And just make sure your source IP address is correct. If you make a mistake, no worries. You can always delete and add, or you can go in and click and edit this and modify it. Right? You can go into the security group basically and modify it in the console. So the template is just a way to get started fast, get up and running really quickly. There's always some customization that you have to do. One of those things is you do need to reset your password. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to create a username. So I'm going to create a username for the admin, and I'm going to give it a password, and it has to be a reasonably good password. And let's try to repeat that. So it seems to like that. Let's go ahead and click update, because we're going to need this when we go in remote desktop. So you do need to override the password. So this will probably take a few moments before it does the update. Okay, yep, so there it is, successfully reset password. I'm going to dismiss those. Okay, so then what I should be able to do at this point is go to my overview. This is the client, and then what you can do is you can click this little connect button if you want. You can certainly copy and paste the information into your own remote desktop client, or you can just download RDP file here. And let me go ahead and double click that. And that's good. That's a good sign. It seems to be responding to remote desktop because we allow that port through. Now I need to change, use a different account. So I'm going to put a slash to clear the domain. Here's my user that I created, and let's see if my password is typed correctly. That's a good sign. Okay, it's coming up. Yeah, and of course, the first time you connect to this, it's probably going to take longer while it sets up kind of your environment there. So a bunch of stuff is going to initialize the first time. But that's good. You got a nice, you got your own local copy of the image, from the master. So, Ixia created the master version, installed all the software, tested it out, and you can kind of just run with something that's ready to go, and it even matches your virtual test appliances. So all the software lines up here. So let's go ahead and let's open up IxLoad real quick. So this video walkthrough is not obviously a training on IxLoad itself, but we'll just do a little bit of basic connectivity checking to make sure that you could basically take things from here. So you're basically running the IxLoad virtual edition. You'll have to license it. You'll have to get your configuration, set up your configuration to run things. But the idea here is we just want to make sure that from a deployment point of view that everything's up and running the way we expect it to be. And we can actually tell that by launching the IxLoad GUI and seeing if we can connect up our test ports. I'm going to go ahead and hide the server configuration there. And I'm just waiting for IxLoad to initialize all its services and such and launch the GUI. Okay, it looks like it's starting to come up here. Okay, I'm just going to work offline. Okay, and let's check our ports. So we can add a chassis, but let's get some information from the setup. So let's go take a look at what the two test appliances are. So we have our pins here. Let's find out what their private IP addresses are, because we should be able to communicate directly with them. So we got a 10.0.10.11, and I'm going to suspiciously suspect that this is a .12, but let's go verify it is. So 10.0.10.11 and 10.0.10.12. So I can add a chassis 10.0.12, 11, excuse me, first. And there's a chassis, and you can see that it has a test port. And we also have 10.0.10.12. So there you go. Basically, you're ready to execute a test. So you have to obviously set up your licensing. And configure, do the normal configuration that you would have to for IxLoad. So that includes going to the file and specifying in the preferences, your license settings. So you have to specify your license servers that you want to run that with, and you have to, of course, configure your network topology, and you can use a lot of the examples in the, your local sales engineer can help you with that process. They do that all day long, and basically you can load in a topology. As long as you have the ports, you're going to be able to execute your tests, and that's going to work really well. So I just wanted to summarize again what was done to get to this point. So again, we went to the IXIA website. I'm going to close this here. We went to the IXIA website, the support site. Once the 9.00 release is published, that'll be a little bit after the time of this recording, but you'll go to the traditional support site. Again, have your local sales team help you if you need help getting access to the software. You will download, in the case of Azure, when you pick IxLoad and you pick Azure as a choice, you will get a tar.gz file that you'll download. You'll unpack that tar.gz file, and what you'll find again inside there is a bash script. The bash script we use to copy the master IXIA page blobs over to your storage account, right? So you created a storage account. You first create a resource group for that storage account. You give it a unique storage account name, and then execute the script. The script will copy over the VHD files and also create an image out of the virtual test appliance. And then you'll pick one of the ARM templates that best kind of matches your environment. You can start with, again, one of the two demo setup environments is a good place to start, either the one ARM demo setup or the two ARM demo setup with the two virtual test appliances. And then you want to make sure that you deploy that, you customize your ARM template. So we did that by uploading the template into Microsoft Azure, using the template mechanism, the ARM template Azure Resource Manager, to deploy. We created a new resource group. In this case, that resource group was called IxLoad Deployment. We monitored the results of the deployment from the Azure portal, and even though it got a failure, we actually can ignore that failure because that failure is expected. The OS provisioning failure, everything else checks out correctly. We went back to and pinned things on our dashboard so we could get to them quickly. For instance, the running Windows machine and the two running Linux machines for the test appliances, and we went in and we overwrote the password. So we wanted to reset the password. That's a step we have to do with the Windows machine, and give it a unique password that we have in our own account. And then we downloaded in the overview a Connect. if you want, or you can paste the information into your local RDP client of your choice. But you can also just kind of use the built-in one if you're on a Windows machine like I am. And then we just remote desktoped into there. We started IxLoad, and then we checked the IP addressing scheme from our subnet. So this was created for us by the template, and we saw that we were given a private IP address of 10.0.10.11 and 10.0.10.12 for our two VM1s, the E0 interface on the VM1s, and they each have a second port which corresponds to the test port, and that's what you can do to assign to your test topology. So once you create out a test topology, you can assign your ports to that test topology and execute your tests. So that's IxLoad on Azure deployment in a nutshell. I hope you found this video helpful. Thanks for watching.